Give me your assessment of what you think is going on in the Middle East with all of this stuff going on with this current fragile ceasefire holding between Israel and Gaza, the still fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and just how do you see this whole dynamic playing out, especially in light of Trump's kind of off-the-cuff comments that, well, maybe we should just clear out the Gaza Strip. How's this going to play out?
First of all, the ceasefire was always meant to be impermanent, in other words, temporary. The idea was that you give the Israeli Defense Force a break, and at the same time, you get some hostages, which satisfies some of the folks on the home front. And then when it becomes useful to do so, you turn back to Gaza. President Trump has now released all of these 2,000-pound bombs that were previously impounded and given them to the Israelis. Well, I rather suspect that when this ceasefire ends, those 2,000-pound bombs will be dropped on Gaza, and the annihilation of the population there will continue. Now, I think President Trump has begun to figure that out, which is why he's gotten on the phone and made these ludicrous calls to King Abdullah in Jordan and General Sisi in Egypt saying, I want you to take these Arab refugees. Please take these refugees. In his mind, he's saying, I don't want to kill these people. I want them to live, so they have to leave. But he's shocked when he discovers that they're not going to leave. They're not going to liquidate themselves, which is effectively what I think President Trump and others are asking. They are not going to volunteer for liquidation, the end of their cause, the end of their history, the end of their identity. They're not going to do that. Now, the Mongols had a solution to this sort of thing. They sent in armies of people and decapitated tens of thousands, salted the ground, tore everything down, destroyed everything in sight. That's what they did at Kiev. That's what they did at Baghdad. We are not Mongols. We're Americans. The Israelis are giving an imitation of Mongolian warfare in Gaza, and I think to some extent also in Lebanon. Is that what we want to do? Is that what President Trump wants to do? And to suggest for a second that there's a good beachfront property in Gaza and might as well turn it over to somebody who will use it is about the most callous disregard for human life that I can imagine. I don't even want to speculate about it. I want to assume that he did not realize what he was saying, and that was an off-the-cuff remark that should be quickly forgotten.
So let me ask you that you very accurately articulated American vital national interest and interests in the Russia-Ukraine war. What is America's enduring interest in this whole conflict here and in the Middle East at large, if you could?
Well, our interest at the outset was still in the region, regionally, stability and peace. And until we began to receive the kinds of information we've been getting about what actually happened on the 7th of October, and the fact that this was hardly a surprise to people at the top of the Israeli Defense Force and intelligence structure, we thought that some campaign of vengeance, what's the right word? Help me out here.
I'm not sure where you're going.
Well, a punitive operation to punish the source was justified. A punitive operation meaning a limited operation into the region, into Gaza, to root out and destroy as much as possible those we think are principally responsible. That's what we thought. Became pretty clear a month into this that that's not what happened in Gaza. What was going on in Gaza was that this particular event, which was not a surprise, was leveraged to justify the worst possible actions by the Israelis against anyone in their neighborhood that they don't want inside their country and they don't want near their country. And that's especially true in Gaza. So that's the sad and tragic state of affairs. So what is our interest today? It's a little different from what it was then. Some people will say, well, we have to have a two-state solution. I don't see how you get a two-state solution. I don't see any evidence that the Israelis will tolerate a two-state solution. I think their mindset is either we continue to do what we're doing or we go down with the ship. They may well be on the Titanic at this point, and that's of their own doing. But I just don't see a willingness to compromise and build a two-state solution. And who is going to govern in the so-called Palestinian state? Well, it's certainly not going to be the Palestinian Authority, which they're just viewed as a group of quislings that don't represent the interests of the Palestinian Arab population. So that means you're not going to get a government in a Palestinian state that's going to be amenable to anybody in Israel. And as a result, probably nobody in Washington, since really the Israeli lobby controls our government. So I think our interest at this point is to stop killing people and to disengage and tell the Israelis that if they want to continue with this policy of mass murder and expulsion, they'll have to do it without us. But I don't see that happening, Dan. What I see is the opposite. I see that they're ready as soon as the ceasefire ends to recommence the operation, don't you?
That's certainly the way it looks to me. And comments from Netanyahu and several other leaders in Israel back that up. But what should we do? Let's say that President Trump is actually watching our show today, and after this is over, he calls you up and say, "Well, okay, we're in a mess." That he was literally handed from the previous administration, and they deserve plenty of blame for that. But now he's at the cusp of a new one. What could he do that would, I guess, the best in this messy situation, achieve American interests?
Well, if we have an interest, I think we do, but I may be wrong at this point in time in Washington. If we have an interest in cultivating good relations for both commercial and business reasons with Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the various Emirates in the Persian Gulf, Egypt, Sudan, the rest of the Arab world, certainly the Turks, then we would want to stop doing what we're doing, because the only thing that we're doing right now is poisoning the well in that region against any future connectivity or benefit that we might accrue. Again, and you should talk next time you talk to Chaz Freeman, who's an expert on this region, much more so than I am. But I think he'll tell you the same thing. We've poisoned people, millions, hundreds of millions of people against us, because we are seen as the indispensable nation for Israel and its bid to murder or expel millions of people from its country. And I don't know how you get past that. This is something that's going to be with us for a long time. Just as whatever we do now, this bad experience that the Russians have had with us is going to be with them for a very, very long time. And I don't know how much headway we'll be able to make in terms of some restoration or creation of some new normality. And that's the bad part. And that's why I think the only thing that you can do at this stage is say, look, if you're going to continue to do this, you're a sovereign state, you can do it. But we Americans are not going to underwrite it. We're not going to support it indefinitely. We're not going to support it unconditionally. That's true for Netanyahu. That's true for Zelensky, by the way, who is an actual puppet of ours. But nevertheless, the message has to be the same. We're not going to support this anymore. That's about as good as it gets from our standpoint.
Man, that is really a sad commentary on the state of affairs in the United States today, when probably the best we can realistically hope for is to cause no further damage and to hope we can avoid an explosion there. But so much damage has been done because of the last number of years, and not just 2 or 3, but probably going back beyond that, that probably is the most realistic hope that we can have, because if we don't do that, it can get worse, and that's what I'm concerned about. But in any case, appreciate you coming on today, Doug, and giving us this insights into what is genuinely in America's interest in both of these two theaters of war. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Oh, and I'm sorry, but one more thing before we go. Was there anything new going on in our country, our choice, that we need to know about?
Yeah, there's a lot, and I've got to get back to Orlando soon because so much is happening down there. And rather than go into detail, I'll just tell people that starting in mid-March and April, we're going to start producing series of events, series of what you would call a television show, but we're live streaming over the internet that will take us to many corners of the United States, that will allow us to talk to many people around the country that are members and also people who are not members about a whole range of things, about the economy, what can be done, what needs to be done, improving our way of life, suppressing criminality, and finally, truly securing the border. And the other thing is, and this is just an observation, I wish I saw more evidence for a systematic, coherent plan going forward to both secure the border and expel the illegals. You know, again, as I've said many times, the easiest thing to do is you give people 120 days to get out on their own and tell them if they leave on their own and they can take whatever they own with them. And if they register on the way out with us, we'll consider them for re-entry in the future. But at that point, when the final clock strikes midnight after 120 days or something, and you're here, you're going to feel the full weight of law fall upon you. I still think that's a good way to do it, but I don't see that happening. In fact, I'm not sure what is happening. And the best way to do this is to publish, a systematic step-by-step plan that reflects the president's intentions. I don't see that yet. Do you?
I have not. In fact, that's been a compliment that we've seen a number of these, big high-profile, splashy media raids and whatnot. But I mean, I see that as actions. I don't see it as a strategy, and I'm hoping to see one to something that could be sustainable and that could be, taken care of, because obviously you can't just get rid of 11 million people in one fell swoop, because then that could have ramifications on our own economy and farming and all that kind of stuff. So somehow we've got to get it done. But I'd just like to see a plan. And so far, all I've seen is a few tactical actions. Yeah, well,
these are some of the things we want to focus on at Our Country, Our Choice in the new programming that we'll have in March and April. And that's why we're going to various places in the country, try to get answers to these questions. We'll see. I feel it's a lot larger than 11 million. And the good news is that our economy will not suffer. Our economy, in most cases, will benefit because we're spending billions on free healthcare, free education, free this, free that we don't have to spend anymore. But that's neither here nor there. We'll sort through that in the future one way or the other. Let's hope for a clear plan.
Yeah, love to see that, and love to see your plan if the government doesn't provide one. But again, thank you very much for coming on today, Doug. We'll look forward to hearing more about that in the future.
Okay, Dan. Thank you.
And thank you guys for joining us too. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't on the way out. Also, let you know Larry Johnson is going to be with us at 2:00 today, just about an hour from now. Always a fan favorite. You're not going to want to miss that. Also, remind you that we are on podcast now. I know some of your friends may not be able to watch on video, but they do like podcasts. Just let them know to go wherever they get their podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, any of those places. Type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive and you'll find us waiting there. And then also another thing I want to remind you about is just that later this afternoon we actually have a triple header going on, or almost a quadruple header going on today. The last one is going to be something that's a little bit different. It's going to be Stephen Marsh, the author of The Next Civil War, is going to tell us how the chances of a U.S. Civil War are greater than you may realize. And this is a little bit sobering. I did a show, I guess, a couple of months back, right before the election, actually, on the prospects of this. Well, now we have the actual author of the book himself to bring things up to date from what happened and what the prospects are from when he wrote this in 2022. Do not miss that show this afternoon at 3 p.m. Thanks very much, and we'll see you at that point on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.